Hey guys, Eric Swanson, the Habitude Warrior Coach. Habitudes is all about your habits and your attitude. So in this next episode, I really want you to focus in on what your habits are every single day and your attitudes as well. And can you change those slightly? So I really hope you'll enjoy this next episode of one of our speakers, our trainers, our leaders from the Habitudes Conference. So looking forward to seeing you inside and checking out the next episode.
And I'm here to talk to you about a really cool concept that piggybacks what Phil Lecter. We've been in business together, Phil and I, and have done quite a bit together. And the topic of communication really comes down to what you heard earlier from Laurel Langmeyer. How many of you felt sales is really important for your business? How many of you feel communication is important for your business? And what about negotiation? Okay, so all three of those techniques is something that I want to share with you. But before I do, and I'm going to focus and pinpoint on those three, and specifically on sales. I'd love to hear, what businesses are you in? What are your industries? What sales affiliation do you have with your own business? If you just want to shout them out. Real estate. Awesome. What else? Membership. Health and wellness. What else? Fundraising. That's a good one. That's a good sale. What? Financial services. Awesome. Home organizing, that's important. You probably got some few clients in here that would like your business card. Who else? Spreading happiness. Ooh, that's a good one. Did you see the smiley guy up here? I practiced the whole day. I was like, I want one of those big pencils. Right? That was awesome. What else? What other businesses are you in? Disaster preparedness, leading with confidence. Okay, excellent. I love that. What else? What? Dental, okay. What? Coaching, that's a great one. SEO and video on websites. Okay, excellent. So how many of you would consider yourself an entrepreneur? Okay, so I want to congratulate you. And if you've never looked up the definition for entrepreneur in the dictionary, it's someone who is willing to assume risk in exchange for gain. And that's the American dream. We're willing to risk it all in exchange for the opportunity to live the life that most people never get to live. So I want to share with you, I also bought into that dream, and I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. How many of you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Right? That's like the Bible for an entrepreneur, and that's actually where Phil and I's journey began. Also Laurel Langmeyer, because she was affiliated with the Rich Dad, Poor Dad company at one point. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad was something that really got into me, and I decided I'm going to quit my job, and I'm going to go be an entrepreneur. And Robert Kiyosaki said, get in sales, so I got involved with financial services, and I was an overnight success. My first year, I made $700. Right? So I don't know if any of you can relate and feel my pain, and the only reason that's even funny is because when you earn $600, the company has to send you a 1099, right? Like I barely qualified for a 1099. And so then I realized, okay, I need a lot of help. And so for 5 years in a row, I committed myself to learning and studying and attending seminars and webinars and hiring coaches and trainers and reading great books and listening to audio programs. How many of you are in that phase right now? Okay, now I want to commend you for that because that's a really important phase. And I grew up in that phase, and I took my income from $700 to $72,000. Now, at that point, the company was celebrating my success, and I had a nice title and an office, but to be honest, I felt like I was totally broke. I was $30,000 in credit card debt to get there. I was renting an apartment trying to qualify for my first home, and I was driving a BMW because I wanted to impress my clients to do business with me, but it was a salvage title. It's the only one I could afford. And then I heard Robert Kiyosaki say, stop taking advice from people more messed up than you. Is that good advice? And I thought, oh my gosh, I better resign as a financial planner. I can't give people advice. You know, when people are like, hey, Cheri, what do you recommend I do with my money? Where do you put your money? And I'd say, well, what money? I don't have any. That's why I want yours, right? Anyway, at that point in my life, I realized that in my journey for sales, that something was broken. And I wasn't sure if it was me that was broken or if it was the system. How many of you have ever asked yourself that question? Because that's just real. That's why 9 out of 10 businesses fail, right? So there I was asking myself that question and wondering if there was a better way. Now, at the time, I began studying about personality types. How many of you have ever studied something about personality types, right? There's dozens of programs out there on the marketplace. And when I was learning about personality types, I started realizing I took an assessment, and I remember everything on the assessment was about me, and I was originally fascinated, like, wow, this is interesting. I'm learning so much about me. But my fascination quickly turned into frustration when I realized that not one single one of these personality type programs ever made me more money. Not one of them ever helped me close more sales. Not one of them ever impacted my bottom line. And that's when I realized, what's the whole point of taking these personality type assessments if it doesn't put money in the bank? I'm starving to death. But there was something inside that personality type concept that caught on, and I ran with it. The idea of personality types dates back 2,500 years to Hippocrates, the father of medicine, who made the theory famous when he called it the theory of 4 temperaments. And what he basically proved was that the entire human race could be divided into 4 different groups. And it was so based in science that he could actually diagnose his patients differently according to which personality temperament they were. So today, millions of us, when you fast forward in time, millions of us have taken some form of a personality-based assessment. How many of you have taken an assessment? Raise your hand, right? There's dozens of them out there. So we've all taken this personality assessment, but those assessments weren't making us rich, or at least they weren't making me rich. And the light bulb went on for me in that exact moment, and I said, wait a minute. If this is based in science, 2,500 years old, that has proven people are different, I wonder if they make buying decisions differently. How many of you think that your customer might make a buying decision differently based on which personality type they are? Does that make sense? Right? So I followed this logic, and I said, well, wow, let's kind of roll with it. So the concept I began exploring, and it turned into a program called Bank. I began testing personality type as it applied to the sales process. And if I could figure out which one my customer was, and if I could figure out what the formula was of how that customer's personality type made a buying decision to get to a yes instead of a no, maybe I could just crack the code on sales. Now, I decided I was going to do an experiment. 17 years ago, as I began creating this experiment, I didn't build it for you, to be honest. I built it so that I would stop starving to death. And what happened was the next year, when my little experiment took my income from $72,000 to over $500,000, a 695% jump in 1 year. How many of you would love that jump this next year, right? And then within 3 years, because I decided to keep doing it, I'm not that big of an idiot, right? If it's working, right? If it ain't broken, don't fix it. So I kept doing it, and within 3 years, my income was over $1 million a year. 33 years old, cash flowing $1 million a year, a 1,400% increase from just 3 years prior. How many of you would love that year next year, right? So if you want to position yourself 2016 for your best year ever, I want to share with you some secrets. Are you guys cool to learn? All right. Fill in the blank. How many of you have ever been brainwashed into believing one of the greatest myths ever told by sales trainers all over the world? That in order to get more yeses, you have to get more what? No. Dang it. It's the one answer that everybody answers the exact same way all over the world. We have been programmed to chase no's because they've convinced us that sales is a numbers what? A numbers game. And it ends up chasing our tail. And for me, I felt like I was living the definition of insanity. You go to more networking events, you get more business cards, you try to generate more leads, and you try to do more. Because if you chase enough no's, you'll get enough what? Yeses, that's what they said. And that was insanity. And the question is, what if there could be a better way? If there was a better way, if there was an easy button, you can just hit it. And all of a sudden, you start closing more sales and getting more yeses. How many of you would want to punch that button? Right? Some of you want to stomp on it, right? So I want to share with you that there is a secret to getting more yeses than ever before. The truth is, I want you to just think differently. Take yourself outside the box for one quick second and answer this question with logic, not what you've been programmed with. In order to get more yeses, you have to get more what? More yeses. Isn't that now obvious? Right? Never fear the obvious. So here's where the concept starts. Our whole tagline is crack the personality code and take it to the bank. Now, bank is an interpretation of the 4 personality types. in a way that the marketplace had never seen. This was based completely on the sales process of what turns a customer into a yes instead of a no. And by the way, we were able to scientifically prove this. Matter of fact, in the next 2 weeks, we're releasing our first white paper published by the lead instructor at San Francisco State University that was so blown away by what we discovered, we were able to prove that bank, in fact, can predict buying behavior and increase the sale. Okay? And we're going to publish a white paper on it. So this is what's exciting, and that's why for any of you who would classify yourself, how many of you would love to get up in front of a room and teach? If it's putting $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month in your pocket, how many of you love that? Okay?
Absolutely.
No-brainer, right? Okay, so if something like this resonates for you, I can tell you our company is exploding globally. We're in over 40 different countries. We just brought this product not only B2C, but now the B2B market, and we're looking for really great professionals that want to teach this inside companies or inside their industries. So come talk to me later about that. But here's the idea. So the idea is crack the personality code and take it to the bank. And using this little diagram, I don't know if you can see it, but this is called a cryptex. Now, a cryptex is a combination of two words, cryptology, which is the science of locking up secret information, and codex, which is the written script or scroll that's locked inside the device containing the secret message. And it was made famous in the movie The Da Vinci Code. How many of you saw that movie, right? Great movie. Well, what was locked inside that device on a little rolled up piece of paper was the secret to the Holy Grail. The challenge is the only way to get access to that piece of paper to know the secret was to crack the code on the device. The code spelled out a magic password. The problem is it wasn't as easy as it appeared, because if you failed to crack the code, this little device was booby-trapped. Think of it like a ticking time bomb. And I want you to imagine that if you failed to crack the code, what you'd crack open instead was a tiny little vial of vinegar that the scroll was wrapped around, and when that vinegar would leak out, it would dissolve the scroll inside, leaving you with what? Nothing, right? Well, I want you to think from this point forward, every single one of your customers everywhere in the world, every lead you generate, every prospect you interact with, every client you sit down with, every appointment you'll ever have, that customer has a little invisible cryptex. Now, you can't see it because it's invisible to your eye. It might be tucked away in their pocket or their purse or dangling around their necklace. You can't see it, but they have it. And I want you to imagine if what was locked inside this little cryptex behind a passcode was exactly what to say to them in your sales appointment to get a yes instead of a no. How many of you would want to crack that code, right? But how many of you accidentally crack open the vial of vinegar and watch that vinegar destroy your sale right in front of your eyes, and you watch that yes turn into a no? How many of you ever felt that? Is that the worst feeling a salesperson ever feels? It's incredibly frustrating. Yet you've been programmed to accept it, to tuck your tail between your legs, and to keep chasing more no's in order to get more what? More yeses. What if there was a way that you could crack the code successfully 100% of the time from this point forward? How many of you would be up for that? How many of you would insist you want to train on that system? Okay, so that's the concept behind it. Let me explain how it works. Tony Robbins has a famous quote that we use that says, "Let your prospect determine your presentation." So what that tells me is, based on the theory of the 4 personality types, I needed to figure out what my prospect was. The challenge is, based on your personality type, most salespeople make a fatal mistake in sales, and that is that they deliver the sales presentation based on their point of view, their dominant personality type. So let's say that you're this one right here. If you delivered this sales presentation to the blueprint, this person, and you happen to be a blueprint, likely you'll deliver the right matching presentation in order for them to say yes, and you close the sale, and it feels great. But chances are, when you deliver the sales presentation to the other 3, you won't close the sale, you'll get a no, and you're leaving up to 75% of your business on the table because you didn't get a yes and you only got a no. Now, if you want to do the math on that real quick, I want you to write down last year's income. Write it down. Last year's income. And now I want you to triple it. Whatever that number is, that's the amount of money you're leaving on the table every time you get a no. How many of you want to take that home instead? Right? Christmas is just around the corner, and you want money in the bank. So the idea is, what if you could deliver the right presentation every single time? Well, in the bank system, what I was able to figure out, the B in bank stands for blueprint. That's the person who's totally inside the box. And they have a very specific way of doing business. There's a strong list of do's and don'ts, what we call the triggers and tripwires for making or breaking the deal. If you cross a line, you're going to break the deal and you're going to go home empty-handed. The A stands for action. That's the person who's totally outside the box, the one that's unpredictable, the one that's usually late, the one that's talking a million miles an hour, the one that hurry up, get to the bottom line. That personality type has a completely different formula to say yes instead of a no. As a matter of fact, if you approach them with a blueprint perspective, how many of you automatically can now see that this person would be turned off? Right? It makes sense, okay? Then you flip over here, the N stands for nurturing. I use the color yellow. Think of warm, friendly, sunshine, happy faces. And they've got a heart of what? A heart of gold. That's right. So if you approach them from a blueprint perspective, you're not going to do business. If you approach them from an aggressive action personality type perspective, you're not going to do business with them. Relationship, they trade in relationship currency. So the people relationship, the nurturing personality type, is a very delicate relationship. Many times on the surface, they can't afford what you're selling because they already gave everything they owned away, right? The shirt off their back. But they have something far more valuable than money, and that's their relationship currency and who they're connected to. So that nurturing client becomes a critical piece of your client portfolio if you know how to close them. And the last piece of the puzzle, K, stands for knowledge. The knowledge is the personality type that engineered the box, right? So we have inside the box, outside the box, the nurturing recycled the box, right? Forgot to say that one. And the knowledge engineered the box. They have a brilliant mind. The way that they process everything is through their computer center up in their head. It's logic-driven, not emotion. And there's a very specific formula that's required in order to get them to say yes instead of a no. Now, the idea behind bank was if you could figure out who your customer was, and you knew the formula, you could start to increase your sales up to 300% faster by simply connecting with all four groups. So this was the journey that we began when we started bringing bank to the marketplace. And as people saw my income go across the $1 million mark, everybody wanted to know, how'd you do it, how'd you do it, how'd you do it? And I started training people. The next thing you know, auditoriums were filling up, hundreds and then eventually thousands. Then I started getting asked to speak on stages across the U.S., across North America, and then Bill Walsh actually opened up the door. I went through his speaker training because I had a story to tell, and he's a phenomenal businessman, and all of a sudden the story was getting told all over the world. Stages in Asia, in Africa, and in Europe. And then Harvard University said, we're so fascinated by what you discovered, we want you to come in and teach this at Harvard. I gave a guest presentation at Harvard. 2 professors got up and said, we want you to be a co-lecturer with us in an MBA level class. This is fascinating. UC Berkeley then said, hey, we want you to come teach this to our MBA alumni network. And then that's when the study came on the table and said, hey, we actually want to do and conduct a formal study. And what we were able to prove in our study, and this is so exciting because everyone around the world is waiting for us to release this white paper. But I got to tell you, the secret behind the white paper is that we were able to prove that bank, in fact, scientifically can predict buying behavior. This is basically giving you a crystal ball on every single sales process, every communication over the phone, over the internet, or live in person with every person that you do business with from this point forward. How many of you think that's the Holy Grail, right? Is that pretty cool? So I'm really excited to be able to share with you. And one of the key things when I was developing this 17 years ago, and I thought, all right, if people are different and personality types are different, well, then the riddle has to solve 2 things. Number one, I have to figure out who my customer is. And I don't have all day. The truth is, you're not just one of the 4. You're actually a combination of all 4. That's what makes your bank code. Think of your customer having like a PIN code, except it's called a bank code. And if you were to go put your ATM card in the machine to get money out, how many digits do you have to enter with your PIN code? 4, right? In what order? In the exact order, right? The correct order. Your customer is the exact same way. They're actually a combination of all 4 personality types. So they have a mixture of blueprint, action, nurturing, and knowledge in them, scrambled in any combination. Well, if you can resort these into any order, what it means is your customer has one of 24 codes. Well, what that told me is that I had a 1 in 24 chance of delivering the right sales presentation to my customer. And by the way, how many times is your customer going to let you pitch them? Probably once, unless they have high nurturing or they're related to you, maybe twice, right? So if you have a 1 in 24 chance, that equals a 4% chance of getting a yes instead of a no. Does it now make sense why they say you have to get more no's than yeses? So the whole thing was, how do I crack someone's code and how do I do it quickly? The only way for me to do it is to simply do what? How do I get someone's code out of them? Ask them, communicate, ask questions. What if I could just have them tell me their code? How many of you think that would be cool if your customer sits down and said, here's my code? Okay? What if there was a trick to do it? And I said, well, what if I invented a card trick, a little magic trick? And so what I created was a little set of 4 cards. And I handed those 4 cards to my customer, and I thought, let's see if this works. So I'd sit down with my client, build some rapport, and then I'd say, hey, client, before we get started, do me a favor. Take a look at these 4 cards. You want to play along with me? Come here. Let's bring her up, right? Come on up, come on up.
Cheri, we don't have time for
Okay, let me just finish this one thing. It'll take 60 seconds. That's how fast it is. So I'd ask my customer, take a look at those 4 cards, sort them in order, put the one that's most like you on top, down to least like you on the bottom. This is going to help me serve you better and save us both some time.
And she's sorting them in order of what her opinion is of her values there. Okay, gotcha.
Do you see how fast she did it? Was it less than 90 seconds? It was less than 60 seconds. Here's the cool thing. In 17 years, 100% of our clients have done this exercise. They love it. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you.
Linda, working it again. Get it? Working it.
And then what we ended up doing for our clients was we built this into a technology, and now with simply the use of the internet, you can crack anyone's code in less than 90 seconds anywhere in the world. And that's how we were able to help our clients take it to the bank. So anyway, Eric, I'm sorry to go over time. Thank you, buddy.